You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Because of the following special program, Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk will not be presented this evening.
It's time to get all your Star Wars news in a single file. This is Making Tracks. Here are your hosts, Mark Newbold and Mark Mulcaster.
It's not true. That's impossible.
It is a period of relative peace and prosperity in the galaxy. We're some 100 years from the fall of the Old Republic and the rise of the Empire. Welcome to Fantha Tracks Reaction Chat for episode 6 of The Acolyte, entitled Teach and Corrupt. So, after last week's saber-swinging bloodbath, where we saw some key characters meet their untimely demises, as well as a number of yellow shirts, this week's episode takes a minute to catch his breath and catch up, and start to explore the new pairings of May and Sol, and Osha and the Stranger. So, joining me on this jaunt around the galaxy is none other than Mark Newbold. And so, Mark, I will start with the most obvious question everyone's asking. And that is, when are we going to get an announcement for the Basil standalone series?
Basil standalone series? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'd love to see it. I think he's a key character. I want to see him played by John Cleese just because.
It might be an issue from continuity perspectives.
Maybe, they could get around it. I mean, Ewoks are just small Wookiees, aren't they? So it's fine. I would like to see that. I don't think it's going to happen. Okay. But then I never thought Cameron of Courage was going to come out. So
no, that's fair enough. Don't mention the Star Wars. But okay, serious question, then. What did you make of this week's episode? Because for me, interestingly and actually quite refreshingly, haven't seen a huge amount of anything about it on social media, which I guess no news is good news, isn't it?
You'd like to think. I mean, yeah. The few weeks leading up to Night last week was very up and down. We had a lot of negativity, but also a lot of positive stuff as well. So it was a real mixed bag. And after last week, I think any of the naysayers probably had to dial it back a little bit, because I think last week was undeniably a fantastic episode of Star Wars. It's weird to say episode of Star Wars when you talk about TV. I'm still not quite used to that. But this week was a total change of pace, which it needed to be. You couldn't keep doing the same thing, otherwise there'd be no characters left, apart from our factory reset Pip. But yeah, I did enjoy it. I came out of this one with more questions, which I like, because I don't want everything tied up in a bow every week. I want to be chewing stuff over in places like this. So I did very much enjoy it. I thought the music as well was especially good in this episode. What about yourself?
Yeah, no, I thought it was good. I guess to my point, you kind of wonder if maybe have it by episode 6 now, those who have not on the Acolyte bandwagon are, they've shouted into the void. They've tried to kind of bring down the the aggregated scores and stuff like that. So their work is done. And I guess in an episode like this, where really there's a lot of kind of conversation, but not much action or nothing really controversial. There's nothing really to kind of go, hang on a sec, and again, it's like all the things that they kicked off with last week about Sith and stuff. I mean, it's still present in the episode, but it kind of gets developed, and we still aren't any clearer about, Chimera or Chimera and or as people still seem to refer to him, and Stars.com seem to be referring to him as the Stranger. So I've kind of gone, well, that's probably makes sense in respects that maybe Chimera is just just a alter ego, is just a like a pseudonym or undercover character that he's just kind of had to create. So it probably isn't his name. I'm sure he's got a name. It's probably John or something. But but yeah, this episode was good. I mean, I did like it. It kind of it had some echoes back to the first episode of how it started with it was Osha waking up and the camera kind of panning up with her, and I thought that's actually just quite a nice little kind of move. Actually, it's quite cool. It's kind of it's in itself quite disorientating, and then we explore the the island and the water world, and you kind of go, that kind of feels a lot like Acto. Where's the porgs?
Well, yeah. I mean, I did a little bit digging around today because I thought exactly the same. First impressions, I thought, is that another island, an Acto? Not necessarily the island that Luke was on, but is that another island? Because it's a planet of island chains sort of thing.
Yeah.
But digging around and looking at what other people have picked up on, especially the cortosis aspects, they seem to think it's Baldemnik, which is a world that's been around in canon for like 20 years. Actually, weirdly, a friend of mine, Arthur Papadum, who I interviewed on Lightsaber like 20 years ago. That's his name. He named it when they used to do What's the Story on StarWars.com. That's where Baldemnik got its name. And it's a world that was seen in the Clone Wars. It turned up in the Plagueis novel. So I think there's connections there. And there's connections to Darth Tenebrius and other characters in and around that sort of era. So and it is a show that seems to be picking lots of little lore things up from Legends, cortosis being one, and there's other nuggets in there that I know Sander, for example, will totally drill into when he gets to doing the guide. So yeah, I like that. If it's not Acto, great, because there's obviously other worlds that look a bit like that, so that's fine. Those little creatures looked a bit like little dwarfed thalassirens, didn't they? Like little baby thalassirens.
Try and milk one of those, Luke.
No, thank you. Yes, have a thimble of green milk, please.
But no, that's the thing. And also, again, I think that would, I mean, on one level, it would kind of make it kind of cool, like a bit of a kind of like link to the sequel trilogy, but also it would kind of make that galaxy a little bit smaller. And you think,
it would.
Surely they would possibly pick up on something, some kind of force vibe or something there, because they both are very adept in kind of like their, feeling things, as it were. Like,
absolutely,
there's definitely got strong connections. So, I mean, it was an interesting episode. It kind of furthers this whole kind of conversation of the peril that the Jedi are possibly fallen into, whereby they're going to be, it looks like they could end up with a lot more heavily scrutinized oversight by the Senate. Which again is kind of like, I suppose in some respects it makes sense to start these kind of things rippling away now, because again it kind of you feel then it makes sense that by the time that you get to the the Attack of the Clones and that, or even Phantom Menace, the Jedi really have to seek permission, have to go and see the Chancellor to do stuff. And so it's it kind of starts to lead us down maybe that route, and how maybe we're starting to get blinkered a little bit and get swept up in politics in a way that they probably don't necessarily want to, but
and that doesn't sound like the sexiest thing in the world. But then again, trade disputes over Naboo didn't sound like the sexiest thing in the world. And look what we got. There's way more. It's just the background. It's just the underpinning of it.
Exactly. It's just it's the kind of the minutiae of world building, and sometimes it can be super awesome stuff like pod races and stuff, and other times it has to be tax disputes. That's just like the nature of like a galaxy, I guess. So it's it was an interesting episode, and again, plenty for people to marvel at. I mean, I was astounded by the size of the stranger's scar on his back.
Yes.
Which again, kind of like for the way it's been discussed online, and I've had a few conversations, people are like, oh, now possibly that doesn't look like a lightsaber scar, and also it would be very it would be very kind of like a little bit too probably too savage for that. But a force whip or whip, it very much looks like that. So now you start to open up a conversation of, well, if he was a Jedi a long time ago, or a Padawan, maybe he was Venestra's Padawan, and something happened, and they basically had a fight, I guess.
I mean, he just say to Osha that he was a Jedi, so we can assume from that, and he can't, like you say, he sort of alludes to being, I mean, Osha's supposed to be early to mid-20s, I think, and if he's the same age as the actor, then he's late 30s, early 40s, so he's probably 15, 16 years ahead of her. That's not particularly a long time, but maybe he's older than he looks. I mean, Finestra's supposed to be in 116. So
I mean, to be honest, you think about it, like 15 years ago for me, I would have been like 28. So that feels like a long time ago, So if he is kind of, like I said, late 30s and stuff, it will probably feel like a quite a lifetime.
Really. There's some wriggle room there, though, isn't there?
I think so. Yeah.
And him being a Jedi, that's interesting because then that puts him in the realms of, as you just said, knowing Vanestra, knowing Sol, knowing Kelnack, and knowing Tobin, those characters, he would know them all.
Yeah.
I mean, I think next week, episode 7, or the 7th episode, is going to really sort
That's
of
a flashback episode, isn't it?
proper. Yeah, I think so. And it won't surprise me one iota if there is an involvement with what happened on that particular planet. So next week, I think, is the real key, certainly to the back end of the season. But for him as a character, yeah, I mean, he's turned not the charm. There's a few little things that happen in this one that are quite interesting. He lets he lets Osha pick up the lightsaber.
Yeah.
He lets her, the moment against the wall with a saber lit, when she says, "I failed as a Jedi," and he's getting in her head. He's doing that Palpatine kindly uncle thing to Anakin. He's just kind of getting into her head. It's almost mellow enough to be considered a conversation at this point.
It's kind of a gaslighting kind of thing, isn't it? Really, in some respects, because he's probing. Like, you see, he's kind of probing to see where, what
the cracks are.
Where the cracks are, what other buttons he needs to press, because and he hones in on something and he kind of focuses in on it like a dentist with a drill, and suddenly that's it. Like, she loses her temper, stuff like that. So, which of course then, it's, and in some respects he did it to Sol, and
big time.
And it's a whole thing with last week's episode when you get the reveal, and I know we'd seen him in episode 2, and so Sol kind of like, what if it wasn't necessarily because you were the guy from the shop, but actually I remember you as a Padawan or something,
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point. I agree. I think it feels like more of a knowing, sort of remembering, you, rather than, as you say, you're the dude from the shop. Because when he went and saw him in the shop, surely he would have gone, lightsabers out, here's the issue. But it isn't. It's almost like a veil has dropped, or something, or a penny's dropped, or credits dropped, whatever you want to say. So, but it feels like there's more to it than just that. But maybe it is as linear as that. Maybe he's just recognizing him from the shop.
Maybe it's
because we're in that lovely point, aren't we, Mark, where we can hypothesize on any little blink or nod.
Exactly.
And, and see where it goes. So
and that's the nice thing with this show, I think, is just that, like, on one level we could quite easily get down into the weeds with speculation. But it's and it doesn't feel like it's a stretch. It kind of does feel like at the moment still everything is still on the table to play for. So depending on how things kind of pan out, and I think really, like you said, how next week's episode shapes, it will really define, I guess, like our opinions and thoughts for where we think episode 8 is going to go, obviously, and if there's a second season as well, because oh my god, we are rapidly approaching the end of this first season, and it feels like it's gone in the blink of an eye.
I said this online. It's like, where is this? We've waited and waited and waited and waited, and here it is. And then all of a sudden, we've got 2 episodes to go, and it's nearly done. I can't believe how quickly it's gone.
Hi, I'm Duncan Poe, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
I mean, I suppose that's maybe part of the thing. Like, this episode again was 35 minutes. So take off like your credits and all your bits and bobs.
Yeah, it's half an hour
stuff. It's a half hour. But I think actually, again, if this was in a film, like, both these kind of conversations could be kind of played out over a longer period of time. In a way that it doesn't necessarily feel like you've just been given this one episode of inactivity.
But don't you think, though, because last week was so kinetic and there was so much going on, and like there's some standout moments. I mean, there's an episode, it was a standout Star Wars moment out of all the Star Wars moments.
Absolutely,
it's right up there. So this week was never going to attempt to top that, and that's not what it was about.
It's flow, hasn't it?
Yeah, totally. But I think coming out of this one, you nailed it in the intro when you're saying, well, now it's Sol and May, now it's the stranger Kamir and Osha, and those relationships, and kind of Basil and Pip, if you want to put those guys together. But you've got that, and I didn't catch the name of the Jedi, the young Padawan.
Now I did, and there's a reason for that, because when I was listening to it, when he first comes in and kind of interrupts her, and she's like, "What is it, Mog?" I was like, "Did you just say Mog?"
That's what I thought. I thought exactly the same.
And so I skipped it back.
Yeah.
And I was like, It sounds like Mark, because I've asked for the most un-Star Warsy name in the whole galaxy if it was.
Yeah.
Let's put on the subtitles, and I know it's Mog, M-O-G.
Mog.
Yeah.
There you go.
You know.
So Mog and Venestra are sort of, it is very much a pairing up of characters in this. A lot of it, you said it, there's a lot of exposition in this, but there's a lot of exposition. I mean, certainly with Venestra, sort of, it's the Columbo moment, isn't it? You know, trying to figure out what happened. She hears it. I was just watching an episode of Ahsoka earlier, and she's the same. She's kind of hearing the moments through the Force, and Venestra's doing the same at the scene of the crime. You know, and we see all the bodies. I didn't expect that. I didn't expect to see Jackie and Yor just dead on the floor like that, and the other parts of the other Jedi. You know, they hid it very subtly with a tree, because I'm assuming the head's over there and the body's over there with a couple of them. But you know, that sequence was more procedural, you know, like police procedural, you know, figuring out what had happened.
Yeah,
but with sorry, go on.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's very much like a CSI moment, isn't it? It's
to
get the guys in, take the photos and stuff, and start to work out where, you know, who could have done this, you know, and especially when we start to kind of jump to those conclusions about, oh, could it actually have been Sol?
Yeah, well, that again, that was I found that very interesting, how twitchy Venestra was, because she's asking this young, well, what do you think happened here? And he's trying to figure it out. And then he's basically, from the knowledge that he's got, he didn't know about this dark character. He doesn't know about the stranger, really. Well, the only other person who's possibly powerful enough to do this was Sol, and he's the only one that's alive. Yeah. And she's like, straight away, well, that's quite an accusation. I thought, poor lad, you know, he's just trying to put, you know, you've got to put it out there into the world, haven't you? You know,
got to say what you see in that situation.
Catchphrase.
Because like, Well, this is it. I mean, because you can't just go, oh well, no, it can't be so. It's got to be some kind of dark side Force user.
You wouldn't. Why would he even think that?
Wouldn't think that at all.
Wouldn't cross his mind.
Maybe some overworked, underpaid Jedi's gone a little bit nuts and just, you know, which is understandable. You know, but I mean, it was nice. I mean, you know, I remember saying last week how there wasn't any close-ups, and then we get this like lovely close-up of Sol when he's, you know, he just goes down to fix the communicator, and actually, ironically, I could kind of see myself in those moments as well, when like you just get a moment of quiet, and you're doing something really mundane, and you're just like, oh my God, you know, and you just lose it, and suddenly it all kind of catches up on you, which I thought was really
well observed, wasn't it?
Yeah, you know, it's nice, and you know, we got a long lingering moments. We could see all the turmoil in his face. We could see all the angst and all the kind of confusion and the conflict that's going on. And like, you know, what does he do? Does he go and, as he decides to, you know, fuck it, I'm going to go to a high council and just, you know, it's time. You know, I can't kind of cover this up anymore. It's time to kind of like face the music, as it were. You know. Yeah,
but I thought with this episode, Kamir is kind of, I'm still going to call him Kamir. He's still carrying on with that, you know, that seductiveness, you know, even down to stripping off and getting in the pool to see. He knew she was there. He totally knew she was there. It was the Kylo Ren in Last Jedi moment, wasn't it? Taken to the next degree.
Whoops. Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, my robe, you know, and he goes for his little swim and he comes back, and it's obvious that what she's seeing. And so he's kind of playing on her head a little bit there. That was interesting in the way that they played that. I thought that was kind of cool. And then you switch back to Sol, who starts off, to me anyway, how I felt about it, he starts off clearly in grief, you know, which isn't essentially or especially what you'd expect from a Jedi. But, you know, if that's your life, if that's your calling, not just of the Force, but almost as a career, because it's not for everyone. But Osha walked away, Ahsoka walked away. It doesn't always work out. Dooku walked away for different. They all left for different reasons. It's not for everyone, but there's a pride in that. And the line from last week that just kept coming back to me was when Kamir, or the stranger, says, you know, Jackie, and he goes, oh, is that its name? You know, she was a child. You brought her here. You know, and that must be ringing around his head. You know, he brought them all there. He took them all there.
So skill.
Totally. Yeah, literally, you know. And so he starts off in that very much in that frame, and you're thinking, how hasn't he cottoned on that this is May? And then I think you kind of realise about halfway through when he stuns her with that Jedi weapon. Yeah. He knew all along. He knew. He knew.
I think he felt, you know, because I was like, he seems to be pretty good at sensing people, like, you know, sense people's deaths, like, you know, and all that. So,
but it felt like it was once he had that moment that you referred to, once he had that moment like a reset, when he was at the console, he just had to kind of get his head together.
Yeah.
That's when he sort of came to it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Ironically, the last time I had that was when I was trying to kind of sort out my collection room, and I was just like, there ain't enough space. I just need to go for a walk and clear my head to work out where I'm going to put stuff.
Yeah, I hear you.
In the bin on eBay.
Oh, yeah.
Anyhow, I mean, I thought that was good, and I mean, I really liked how I'm just kind of seeing it in my own head, like on set. They're like, right, okay, so Basil needs to reset Pip. How's he going to do it? Oh, like you would do an iPhone, just hold down 2 buttons until it kind of resets.
Literally was, wasn't it? Yeah.
You know, so as May who did that, actually, I tell a lie, but yeah, I mean, and that was cool. It's kind of like it's these little things that you think, well, actually, you know, is that going to be used against her or something later on? And you know, so for 2 different kind of relationships are kind of developing in different ways. You know, like you said, you've kind of got that courtship and seduction from Kimir with Osha. You can kind of see that he's like, this is the one that will really kind of allow me to. He doesn't say rule of 2 as such, but it's something.
I think he all but says it, doesn't he? That was the one thing that stood out to me. Even though you're hearing, and loads of people have picked up on it, so very subtle Kylo Ren refrain throughout, you know, in different bits, mostly in the credits. It's definitely in there. It's definitely there. So I think on one hand they're teasing a Knights of Ren thing, but then he is kind of more talking about a Sith thing. But if I don't know where they're going to go with this history, if the Knights of Ren are kind of a offshoot, a parallel to the Sith, then you're kind of going to take that and make it into your own thing, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think, you know, barring what we saw, I think it was in the Darth Vader comics, were basically, you know, the Ren were basically to set out to eradicate everyone, like eradicate both the Jedi and the Sith, because they had an issue with both. And did they kind of they go and confront Vader at one point?
I think so, yeah.
Castle, you know, so I should have like paid more attention to it the second time I watched it, but it's like there was more of a kind of a slight kind of witchy kind of rhyme of you know 2 and stuff rather than like the rule of 2. It was again, it felt like it was something other than Jedi and the Sith. You kind of think, well, then that can make sense. I mean, you know, right now I'm totally fine. I mean, I'm totally fine if he turns out to be a Sith and he turns out to be Plagueis or even Tenebrous, even though you know they have to retcon the actual species.
Yeah, it was a moon, wasn't he?
He's a moon, and I think the other one was a Biff. I think Tenebrous was a Biff.
Yeah.
So you know, well, you know, but that's in the grand scheme of things, that's really affecting one Legends book, I think. So
yeah. Well, they changed Ki-Adi-Mundi's age, so imagine if they changed their species. I mean, there would be meltdowns. Yeah.
Oh my God.
For everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video, and social media feeds, bookmark FanthaTracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
If it's Ren, I think that'd be really cool, because I'm just like I really like that, because that's kind of, you're setting up something that skips over the OT in the prequel trilogy and then just kind of comes back in the sequel trilogy. And I like that idea. It's like, you know, when like a character in either in a soap opera or like a series kind of like you think gets written out, but then kind of get, you know, returns. Like
Dirty Den coming back, isn't it?
It totally is. Yeah. Or, you know, I was thinking of something a little bit
Bobby out of the shower.
Yeah. I've been watching a lot of Burn Notice, and loads of characters going to come back and stuff like that a couple of seasons later. But, it's the same kind of thing, isn't it? You know, but I like the idea, because it's like, then again, you've kind of you're dancing around these pre-established history, and hopefully not necessarily pissing too many people off, but also then you can do, like, you could take that whole Ren thing and go, right, that's another series, that's a whole nother film franchise right there, you know.
Completely. And it makes sense for Disney, because I mean, obviously, you know, with Force Awakens, we all know, somebody at Lucasfilm told me once, it's a soft reboot, you know. So that's fair enough. It relaunched the saga. It was enough of its own thing to work as its, you know, as a starter for a new era. But to have, as you say, to have the Knights of Ren be another, you know, and this is it. We've got the High Republic. We've got Phase 2, especially with all these different Force sects. We saw it in Rogue One with the Guardians of the Worlds, which is ancient Star Wars stuff that I think that's in the first book, wasn't it? Journal of the Worlds and all that sort of stuff. So it's all in there. Freedom Sons, you start thinking, when's that going to come in? So there's all these different groups of potential Force or groups that can access the Force, rather, good or bad. So it's not like it's new. If I know we kind of bounce around, all sorts of stuff and grab the big bits. But if you start sort of thinking and drilling in, I think it is there. If you want to start getting into the books more, start getting into the comics more, it all makes sense. So I agree with you. I think it makes all the sense to skip that Sith lineage and move it to something else, because it's still a massive threat to the Jedi.
Yeah.
It's just not a Sith. Ki-Adi-Mundi was okay. Maybe his phrase was factually incorrect, and maybe we will get to the end of the season and go, oh, it wasn't the Sith, it was the Ren. Which again I'm fine with, but for canonical reasons, as much as just I think it'd be kind of cool, like you said, to link more things to the end of the second or the third trilogy rather than keep going back to the well.
Because like you've kind of then you've got this through line, let's say, of the Sith and the old the Sith and the rise of the Empire through to rebellion and stuff. But it's, I don't want to say it, but it's like it's almost a bit of a multiverse. It's like you've got that, and then like you've got a branch out of here, which then just kind of comes back later on and rejoins. And so that's a whole lot of mileage that you can then kind of explore. And for another 20, 30 years.
Oh, totally.
You have to kind of circle straight back to The Force Awakens. So.
And that they connect at some point, because Palpatine is kind of playing Kylo. Every voice you've ever heard in your head was me. Exactly. And he's a Knight of Ren, but it's a Sith that's doing that. So that there's a meeting at some point.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, obviously way earlier than that. It's before Force Awakens. But just as you say, the journey to get into that doesn't need to step on any eggshells at all.
Exactly. Well, there you go. And that's like another interesting question straight away would be like, when did the Emperor become aware of the Ren?
Mm.
There's all these little things that
love it.
It's exciting without none of this may come to pass. But
no, that's fine. But we love our headcanon, don't we?
Yeah, exactly.
What did you make of Saul then? I do think that there was just a subtle change. There was just something a little bit when May was sort of chained, secured to the sort of the med bed. And that makes all the sense. Why would you let her roam around the ship knowing who she is? Her proclivity of using knives and weapons. And stuff. Yeah. Don't exactly, why risk it? But just the way he puts his hand down is like, you are going to listen to what I've got to say. Yeah. And it does feel like next week will be, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. I killed your mother. I killed his. You know what I mean? It's like it just feels like there's something's going to happen. And there was just a tone to Saul that was just like a little dial up of. It wasn't. I need to get this off my chest. There was more to it than that. And I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was, but it did seem a little bit sinister to me.
It could be, it could be the fact that, there's something still at play that we haven't quite, climbed onto. It could be the whole thing of with most kind of fights and disputes and arguments that actually there's two sides to a story, and we've seen kind of one side from Osha's perspective. We haven't seen it from May's, I'm also kind of quite fascinated to potentially look at this whole kind of I guess you'd say the tragedy of Soul, as it were. We see him at the start of the series that he's kind of this, grand kind of proud
bygone Jin guy, yeah,
pretty much,
yeah.
And then by 6 episodes in, he's got a slash on his tunic, and he looks shattered and worn down and physically, mentally beaten. And I think he does on one level. I think he's probably bottled it up for something where he's probably aching to actually tell somebody and just get it off his chest.
Yeah.
But and
absolution. I think that was what she said to Tobin, wasn't it? I can offer you absolution.
Exactly. Yeah. But it might be that actually, whatever Tobin did was a part of the whole thing, but it wasn't necessarily it could have been quite bad. He might have, because he was a Padawan, he might have done something, but actually it was because of his lack of experience, has maybe killed people rather than out of spite or anger. But whereas maybe Soul did something different, whereby it was kind of, it set the whole thing in motion, really, a bit like May did with the fire.
Hi, this is Ashley Eckstein, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
Really struck me this episode. I like the fact that, again, there wasn't a lot of action. It makes those moments more special when it's not a continuous thing. And there was a great post online. Somebody today was saying, what's your benchmark for Star Wars? What's your expectations whenever you watch Star Wars? Is everyone's expectation for everything Star Wars right up here? And it can't be. You've got to have the peaks to appreciate the troughs and vice versa, So I think you need, a slower lead up to things. Andor did it brilliantly. Every one of those 3 episode arcs, the first 2 were just gearing up. The third one, bang, it would give it to you. And I'm expecting more from season 2 like that.
Well, look at The Empire Strikes Back.
Dagobah's not exactly a roller coaster ride, is it?
Oh my God! When I was a young lad as a new fan, oh my God, I'd love watching the opening half hour or so on half.
Yeah.
And would I fall asleep or fast forward through some of Dagobah stuff? It just goes on and on and on.
Yeah, which seems sacrilegious now because we know how important it is.
Yeah.
And this is something I was saying again a lot, but we're online a lot. I said to somebody the other day, back in the day when the world was different, and films took 3 or 4 years to come onto video or 3 or 4 years to come onto television, and you'd only got Star Wars and Empire really, and Jedi eventually. There was nothing else apart from the making ofs. You would watch those films again every day of the 6 weeks holiday. You were watching Star Wars, so you were intimately familiar with those films.
Yeah.
And now we're just ridiculously blessed to get live action Star Wars for a span of 6 or 7 weeks every single week. And we will watch them 2 or 3 times, and then we might revisit it again in a year or so. So we're not living with these things. I think Star Wars is built for repeat viewing.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, I said this about the sequel trilogy is what we think about it within the first 6 months of the release will hopefully be completely different by 5 or 10 years time.
Totally.
But things bed in because you do just stick it on, or you find out it's on ITV on Christmas Day. Sod it, we'll just stick it on.
Yeah, stick it on. Yeah,
and you just become familiar with it, and then you're like all the little niggles that really stood out to you. You just go, it's not so bad.
I've got to tell you something, man. I was watching A New Hope, the original, the other day on Disney Plus. I'd watched Rogue One after last week's episode, and I thought I'm just going to go straight into A New Hope. So I watched A New Hope and got to the scene where Han and Luke are in the cockpit, and Luke's, well, what do you think of it, Han? I'm trying not to, kid. And that whole exchange, I'd never noticed. And I must have, on a hand on heart, easily watched that film 150 plus times over the years. Easily, probably more. I stopped counting after 100. Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm that guy from Rebel Force Radio. And I'd never even picked up on the fact that Han is in Chewie's seat and Luke is in Han's seat. I'd never picked up on that. And just then your brain starts going, well, why is he letting the kid fly the ship? But it's just part of the big brother kind of Han and Luke thing that develops over the years, isn't it? And I'm like, why had I never picked up on that? I don't know. So my point is that even after watching these things a million times, there's still little things in there you can pick up.
There's all stuff. Because that's the thing, and the more you watch it, the more you stop focusing on you don't need to focus on the story. You don't need to listen to the John Williams music. You can just focus on the random dude in the background.
Yeah.
I know that's one of the things I've liked about this series is that I haven't, the last few episodes, they haven't really gone to overpopulated places. Yeah. And when they, the planets they've gone to feel very much like the kind of planets you do kind of go to and stuff like Jedi Survivor, where you land your ship. There's a little bit of stuff around, where the ship is, and then you're off into the wilderness and stuff. Really,
well, it's a bit like Jakku, isn't it?
A bit like Jakku, It's
Nima Outpost, and there's little pockets of places.
It just makes me think about, and I'm sure they've got names, but the 2 brothers who are sat there, in Kotar, where it is, and you're just like, what the hell are they doing there? Because do they literally bank on Jedi coming into this planet to kind of explore it to make any money or something? Because it's just it just seems
playing Jajaric with actual pieces. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Which again, color me interested if somebody actually wants to make a set of those, because that'd be awesome.
Yes, please. The Regal Robot, I'm pretty sure they'll make it.
Oh yeah, exactly. Then they won't ship over here because they don't have a license.
Yeah. So what was your big sort of takeaway then from this episode?
Big takeaway was Osha clearly got an eye full of everything, which, good for her.
But then she goes to having an eye full of nothing when she puts the hat on, the
Well,
helmet
this is
on.
it, and I love that. I love that whole sensory deprivation thing.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
admittedly, I was kind of semi-expecting a bit of a jump scare coming out.
Me
Like, I
too.
just like I was like, there's something like, is he gonna pull a lightsaber out or something? But no, I mean, so I on one level, I've always found some of these episodes to have kind of like ended quite abruptly and a little bit too short, but they're quite nice junctures to
Yeah.
end because it's like,
I like the hard cut to the credits.
yeah,
I'm enjoying them.
exactly. Because I think, you know, sometimes we've seen that, like, you know, if you do a wipe and you do a wipe badly, it doesn't quite work. You know, helicopter shots on top of a like Acto, for example.
Going around and around and around and around. Yeah.
Yeah, but at the same time, I think, you know, because that was the thing, was like, well, he's got to put the helmet on, so he's making headway. He's, no pun intended, like he's making towards, like, you know, trusting her, like she's trusting him a little bit more, you know. And I think she's also curious to kind of start to say, well, actually, you know, if I can get, you know, back in touch with the Force, and, but, you know, the way, because I like that whole thing of, like, she says about how, like, you know, Jedi, like, you got to use your powers or you lose them, and he's like, no, you don't.
No, you don't. Yeah.
I call BS from that, you know.
Yeah, I like that too. I thought it was clever.
You know, but I suppose it kind of swings around, doesn't it? Because, like, you know, because we've always seen this, like, you know, even with people like Luke, who they cut themselves off from the Force, but like they very quickly kind of become reacquainted with it. You know, I think probably the biggest one was probably Obi-Wan. I think he was the one who struggled the most, really, to an extent.
Yeah.
But I think that was just more of a psychological block from his own perspective. And
and of all those characters, you'd probably think Obi-Wan had spent the longest time and studied the most, and you know, because he was never seen as a remarkable Jedi, was he? It was being Anakin's master that kind of elevated Obi-Wan. You know, and Anakin knows that, because he's like, I think he even says it. Is it in episode 2? Oh yeah, in some ways I'm ahead of him. You know, he's holding me, and then obviously by 3 he's holding me back. Yeah, so Obi-Wan was a people person. He was he was the negotiator, wasn't he? As General Grievous said, you know, so he had those skills. But yeah, I did like. I picked up on that line as well. That, you know, it's BS. You can just go into it. But he's coming at it from that different angle, isn't he? That dark side angle. It's like, use all your emotions, use all of that. So that helmet is going to be key, isn't it?
I think so. I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens when she takes the helmet off and see what she, you know, it reveals to her, you know, because that's, like you said, like, you know, you're just, well, he echoes what Yoda says, and he kind of, you know, he says about, like, you know, you basically just, it's just you in the Force, and wherever you take him with you, you know. And I like that. And it's kind of like there's that episode of the Clone Wars where Dooku kind of teaches, like, Savage Press, like, and basically just kind of like turns everything that Yoda says pretty much on its head. And so it's kind of like a slightly more like subtler, like you know, way of doing it. And I think it kind of works. So I think this episode, when we take a step back in a couple of weeks' time, and we look at it, go, this episode was so important. And if they didn't spend the time with these characters to develop that, it would just probably make the next 2 episodes just not, like, just land. Hopefully, anyway.
Hopefully, yeah, totally agree. And just, I suddenly thought of something when you were just saying about, you know, the helmet, the sensory deprivation, your eyes can deceive you, don't trust them, which is something that he alludes to. You know, remember when you're training and they put the thing over your head? And I'm just wondering whether what we see with Khmer is what is actually there. I know in episode 2 we had Zam Wessel, who's a shapeshifter. You know, I'm not saying that that's what he is, but there's things that are going on that characters aren't picking up on. There's things that are happening that they're not seeing. And I just wonder, with May now sort of captured by Sol, and Osha now under that helmet, 2 things. I'm wondering what her reaction to Sol will be if and when they meet up again. I'm sure they will. Will she perceive him differently? Is there a twist coming up there? I just can't help but think, though, that at some point, I don't know if Khamir's going to make it to the end of the season. I just think now that might have been a tactical mistake, putting her under that helmet. Maybe there's more going on, or Osha, I should say. You know, there's more going on there. So again, like you say, I think we'll find out. I feel like next week's going to be mostly in the past to see why we got to this point, how we got to this point. But
I think I would like to hope that it will, fill in some blanks, and obviously, like this the series has done so far so well. It's like it's given us answers, and it's made and raised more questions.
Yes.
So hopefully we'll be here to talk about it. Although actually I'm going to be on holiday, so I might be doing it by the side of the swimming pool. So
That's fine. I'll find somewhere nicer to do instead of my bedroom. I'll find somewhere much nicer. So you can be sitting there drinking your pina coladas and your budgie smugglers, and I'll try and find something, somewhere a bit more suitable.
Probably on the iPhone. However, let's give it a good college try. So make sure you tune in for that disaster.
Visit fanthatracks.com or be sure to comment, like and share on our social media feeds at Fanthatracks. Send in your listeners' questions by emailing radio@fanthatracks.com. Subscribe, leave a review, preferably a 5-star one, on Amazon Music, Audible, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcatcher or smart speaker of choice. And as always, thanks to James Temple for composing the Fanthatracks intro, Adam O'Brien for our Making Tracks opening music, and Mark Daniel and Vanessa Marshall for our voiceovers. Tune in to Good Morning Tatooine. It's live Sunday evenings, 9 o'clock UK, 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific, on Facebook, YouTube and Twitch. And check out our Fanthatracks Radio Friday night rotation every Friday at 7 o'clock UK time for new episodes of The Phantom from Down Under, Planet Leia, Desert Planet Discs, Start Your Engines, Collecting Tracks, Cannon Fodder, and special episodes of Making Tracks, and every Tuesday at 7 o'clock UK time for your weekly episode of Making Tracks. And remember, Fanthatracks.com, our social media feeds, Fanthatracks TV and Fanthatracks Radio are absolutely so no Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, Kickstarter or Indiegogo required to stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news.
So I think for now, anyway, let's leave this episode here, there, and everywhere. Yeah. And thank you very much for joining us. Be back next week, and hopefully keep your ears and your eyes out for amazing content from Fanthatracks, which are going to come out of London Film Comic Con all this weekend. Of course, if you're at London Olympia, make sure you head to the Star Wars Zone and say hi to us. Grab a pin badge, and we can talk some Acolyte in person. Stay safe, and may the Force be with you.
Coming up next on Fanthatracks Radio, it's Desert Planet Discs.